In this video I'm going to show you how to set up Configuration Manager 2012 Service Pack 1 on Windows Server 2012 using SQL Server 2012 for the database. I'm using a single domain controller, and this server is also going to host Config Manager, and it also has DHCP and DNS installed on it. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to talk kind of quick, try to keep this all into one video. I've already inserted the SQL Server 2012 CD. You can download the trial ISO if you need. Okay. You will need to be running a 64-bit edition of Windows Server. It needs to be 64-bit in order to host Config Manager. Okay, so we got a few warnings. These are okay. One is that it's a domain controller and the Windows firewall. We're going to add some exceptions to the firewall after we install SQL Server. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do next. Accept. Okay, the database engine is the only required feature that you need, but I'm also going to install the reporting services. That's going to allow me to install the reporting services point in Config Manager, and also the management tools complete. That will allow you to connect to the SQL Server and change some configurations from the management studio. Okay, I'm going to use the local system account to run all of these services. You could use a domain service account or the system account or just the accounts that are already in there. I just prefer using the system account. Let me go back here. The collation, this needs to be this collation right here for Config Manager to be able to install on it. I'm going to add the current user. I'm logged in as the domain administrator. This obviously isn't best practice, but since it's just a lab I'm setting up, it should be okay. But you could use just a standard domain account, but the account that you use to install Config Manager and SQL Server will need to be in the local admin group on the server you're installing it on. Okay, I'll go ahead and pause it while this finishes up. Alright, so the SQL Server just installed okay. I'm going to go ahead and apply the cumulative update 3 for SQL Server 2012. Currently, you need to have at least cumulative update 2 installed in order for Config Manager 2012 SP1 beta to be installed. If not, the prereq checker will fail and you won't be able to install it. Okay, if you have any files show up as needing to be closed, you can go ahead and close the process. If not, you may need to reboot in order for the update to take effect. Okay, so cumulative update 3 was just installed okay. Next thing I'm going to do is open up 2 ports for the firewall for SQL communication. It's going to be TCP 4022 and 1433. I'm going to allow the connection on the domain profile. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is open the Management Studio for SQL. Okay, and go ahead and connect to the server that you installed SQL on. And next thing you're going to need to do is set minimum and maximum memory requirements. Microsoft recommends at least 8 gigabytes of memory for a primary or CAS site server. So I'm going to go ahead and give a minimum of 8 gigabytes. I'll just set the max to let's see, 10,000 megabytes. I guess that's around 9.5 gigs or so. If you don't set a max, SQL may use more memory than it should. Microsoft recommends setting between 50% to 80% of the available memory on your machine for SQL's minimum and maximum memory. Right now I'm running about 16 gigs of memory, so that's about right. Right, here's the version number. I'll have a link in the blog where you can see what's the latest version available, and it will give you a link to download the hotfix for it. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and install the Windows ADK for Windows 8. And that's the assessment and deployment kit. And I'll also have a link in the description for this as well. You only need to install deployment tools, Windows PE, and user state migration. This is also a mandatory prerequisite in order to install Config Manager 2012 SP1. Okay, so that finished up. The next thing we're going to do is run the extend schema tool. And what this does is it creates 4 new classes and 14 attributes to Active Directory, and it will allow clients to find management points and server locator points and config manager site information. So if you go to your config manager CD or the extracted ISO, if you downloaded it, it's in the SMS setup folder, bin x64, and then it's ext ad sch. So it's this little tool right here. I'm going to go ahead and run it. Now, in order for this to run successfully, you need to run it with a account that has schema admin rights on the domain. It will create a log called extadsch. You just want to make sure that it successfully extended the Active Directory schema. Okay, so once that's created, we want to make the systems management container. And this also allows clients to find information about the config manager site. So once you connect to your domain in ADSI Edit, you want to open the system container. And on this container, we're going to right click it and add a new container. And this container name needs to be system management, just like that, and finish. Go ahead and click the properties of that container and go to security. And you need to add the config manager site's computer account. So if you go to the objects, you need to check the computers. And then you can just type in the server name and then click OK. And you want to allow full control and then click the advanced. Okay, so now in the advanced tab, go ahead and click the computer that you just added. And you need to apply it to this object in all descending objects, and then click OK and then apply. And that should do it for creating and delegating control for the system management container. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is create a group policy. This is optional, but I'm going to create a policy that allows clients, or will allow you to install the client using the client push method in the console. And what you need to do is go to the computer policies. I'm applying this to the default domain policy. You could apply it wherever your clients are going to be. Then you're going to go to the Windows settings, security, Windows firewall with advanced security, inbound roles, and then add a new one. Predefined, and add file and print. This will enable the $$ share. It will allow the config manager server to copy the content or the binaries for the client to be installed onto the computer. And then we're going to add WMI. That's Windows Remote Instrumentation. This also needs to be added so the config manager server can connect and install the client. And that should do it for setting the policies for Windows Vista and above. If you're running Windows XP, you're going to have to apply this at the administrative templates, network connections, and then Windows Firewall, and then domain profile. You would need to enable file and print, and you could set up the config manager server's IP if you only wanted to allow it file and print sharing from that computer. And you would also need to set up the remote administration exception and just enable that, but I don't have any XP clients, so I'm going to just leave this blank here. Okay, so next thing I'm going to set up the required roles and features on the server to support config manager. Okay, and you could automate the installation of this using PowerShell or okay, so you need to enable web server IIS, and I'm going to enable Windows Server Update Services. This is optional, but this will allow you to configure your config manager site to be used to push Windows updates. If you have it already configured on a remote WSUS server, you can just install the administrative console on the config manager server. For the features, you need to enable bits, that's background intelligent transfer service, and then remote differential compression. Okay, now you're going to have to go to the role services for IIS, and you're going to have to configure the correct ones, and I'll show you which ones you need. This is fine for the common HTTP features. For the health and diagnostics, that's fine as well. The performance is fine. For the security, you need to add basic authentication, URL authorization, and IP and domain restrictions. And then for the management tools, you need to enable all of these, and then these two as well. Okay, and then for the application development, I'm going to go ahead and add ASP, and then go ahead and click next and begin the installation. You're going to have to specify where you want to store your WSUS content that you download. So I'm going to just make the folder here and tell it to point to that path. And then I'm going to begin the installation. Alright, so those features and roles finished up. So now if you go to the notifications, you can go ahead and launch the post-installation task. Okay, so while that's configuring WSUS, we can go ahead and move on to installing config manager. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the setup CD or ISO and open up the splash and install config manager. So I'm going to go to the CD and open up the splash. Okay, I'm going to choose this option here. I'm going to just use I'm going to set up a primary site. I've already downloaded the updates. But if you hadn't downloaded them, you would just choose a folder and it would download the latest updates that you need to install it. just do English. The site code cannot be changed, so you want to make sure you have a 3-digit code that you want to keep. And then give your site a description. And I'm going to install the management console. I'm going to install it as a standalone site. And in Service Pack 1, you can join a primary site to a CAS even after the installation if you only choose a primary site. I'm not going to be using HTTPS, so I'm going to configure each communication method on each site system. I'm going to install a management point and a distribution point. Okay, I may have misconfigured SQL memory, so we may get a warning there. Let me just double check that. Okay, yep. Yeah, I think I assigned the memory just under 4 gigs, or just under 8. Let me just check that. Okay, so this should actually be 8196 for 8 gigs of memory. So if we rerun this check, that should go away. And you can actually install it with less memory. That's just the recommended amount, and will only give you a warning. Okay, so everything passed. I'm going to go ahead and begin the installation. Alright, so the install just finished up. Click close and exit. And open that up. Okay, so for the initial configuration, you're going to want to set up boundaries. I'm going to set it up based on my AD site. Okay, and you could apply it based on, there's a lot of different things. You can do IP subnet, an IP range. And then once you have a boundary made, you're going to want to create a boundary group. And what that does is it allows you to assign members of that boundary to a certain site. So you can use this boundary for site assignment. You want to do that. And you want to assign it for content. So you can have boundaries for content and different boundaries for site assignment. Since this is all a single site on a single server, I'm going to create the boundary for site assignment and the content both in the same boundary group. Okay, and then for discovery methods, go ahead and enable Active Directory discovery. Okay. And there's some options here. You can only discover computers that have been online in the past 90 days, so you won't be discovering old objects. Just click OK. Let me go ahead and run the first one right now. Okay. So if you go to your site configuration and then sites, we go ahead and enable the client push installation. I'm going to allow it to be installed on site servers and domain controllers. You can choose which one you want to do. And the account is going to need to have local admin rights on the remote computer you're trying to push the client to. So this could be any domain account that has local admin rights. Okay. And then the password. And apply. Okay. Okay. Okay, so it's already discovered a client on our domain since we ran the Active Directory discovery, and that's this client right here. So let's go ahead and try to push the client. If you created that GPO, it should allow us to push that. Okay, so here's the client. You can see that the CCM setup is running and installing the client from that remote push. And once that installs, we'll go ahead and see that the client installed. But this should wrap up this video of setting up SCCM 2012 Service Pack 1.